Welcome back to watching Business Incorporated live on Channels Television. Now to our next conversation. Turn our focus to African commodities like grains and cocoa. Earlier this month, the UN reported that global food prices are at their highest in a decade and on a rising trend. Well, let's get an outlook for these commodities from Ted George, founder and chief narrative officer at Cleo's Advisory UK. Great to have you.
It's great to be back. Thanks.
Compliments of the season, and it's good to have you before the end of the year.
Absolutely. Well, it's great to sort of kind of wrap it up because it's been quite a remarkable year for commodities, and they've
Quite a
pretty much risen
remarkable year.
across the board.
Yeah. So, which foods have seen the highest price rises?
Well, I think particularly the staples, things like maize and wheat, they're up over 50% since the pandemic. A lot of consumables, sugar, coffee, and I think anyone would have noticed this in the shops. I mean, it's the same in developed markets and in Africa, but also local staple foods. And a lot of that is to do with the fact there's been disruption. And when there is disruption, value chains, even local ones are disrupted, all the prices have gone up. And of course, this is tough for West Africa because for most households, food makes up a large proportion of their income and the cost of living. So it's been pretty tough across the board.
Yeah, and everybody's got to eat. Well, why have grain prices risen so strongly? Can we, expect prices to actually rise further?
Well, yes, so much of this has been to do with a combination of factors. I mean, one really above all has been weather. If you look at wheat, for example, it's up nearly two-thirds since the start of the COVID pandemic. It's very close to its record of 10 years ago. We've seen bad harvest in Australia. That's related to climate. A lot of uncertainty about the Russian export policy. But also, I mean, the global surplus for wheat is just 2 million tons. That's the lowest this century. And there's, of course, demand for things like wheat and maize for things like bioethanol and feedstock. So I think basically going forward, we are going to see strong prices, but it's a local question because in South Africa, they had a great maize harvest. So if you're in South Africa, maize prices are cheap, but if you're importing wheat into Nigeria, it's going to be expensive going forward as well.
Quite interesting. Well, cocoa prices have been volatile over the past year, but have ended up where they started at around 1,700 pounds sterling per ton. What has caused this volatility, and will it continue in 2022?
Yes, it's been a real yo-yo of prices this year. We saw them surging at the beginning of the year because of the lockdowns, the jamming up of value chains, because a lot of cocoa which goes into chocolate is just-in-time delivery. People don't keep hundreds of thousands of tons in stocks, they just have enough. So as soon as everyone thought there wasn't enough, up goes the price. It then slumped when the lockdowns stopped in the mid-year, it rose again towards the end of the year. I think the big thing here is it's not about is there enough cocoa produced. West Africa has just had another great crop in the 2021 season. The big issue here is can they get the cocoa to the grinders and to the chocolate makers on time? And the moment Omicron rose its head, the prices rose, but again, they've fallen a bit again. So I think this uncertainty is going to keep going. But the likelihood is if global value chains do start moving again and the world somehow copes with Omicron better than all the previous variants, then there's a lot of cocoa on the world market. We could see prices weaken substantially.
Right, and coffee, an important export crop for Africa. We've seen the prices, risen strongly over the year. What has caused this, and which countries in Africa have benefited from this rise?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen cocoa prices rise to, coffee prices rise to 10-year highs. I mean, they're up 140% since the low back in May last year. And in fact, a lot of this is basically linked to the pandemic. We've seen, which caused some disruption in supplies, but also erratic weather in Brazil, which is the largest producer of bulk Arabica for the world market. And also then uncertainty in certain markets. I mean, Ethiopia, we have the civil conflict going on there. That's a major producer of Arabica. And also the outbreak recently of the latest wave of COVID in Vietnam, the largest supplier of Robusta. So I think all of these factors are playing in, and it basically means coffee prices are likely to remain high. The countries that will benefit in Africa, particularly Uganda, the largest exporter of Robusta in Africa, and in West Africa, countries like Cote d'Ivoire, and to a certain extent Nigeria, Ghana, which also export coffee, there's a lot more demand for it now. There's just not as much on the market as people want.
Right, and you did mention weather. Well, climate change, another huge issue at the moment. We're in the middle of the weather phenomenon known as La Nina. What impact has this had, and what will this mean for soft commodities in 2022?
Well, La Nina has been going on since last year. We have these two weather phenomena, El Nino and La Nina, and they're cooling and warming, and they affect the global weather in different ways, but quite profoundly. So, for example, we saw much drier conditions in the USA and South America. That affected crops. But, in the USA and South America, you remember some of the huge fires that they had in the USA last year, or over the course of this year. But conversely, we've seen much wetter weather. In Australia, for example, which was burning 2 years ago, it just had its wettest November in 120 years. But then a flip side of this is some areas have had perfect weather. As I mentioned, South Africa, the best maize harvest in its history, mostly thanks to the weather. So the trouble is we have climate change ongoing, we're very aware of. That is disrupting weather patterns. And then we have a natural phenomena of disrupted weather. So I think the real thing is expect instability coming forward, but there will be winners and losers from La Nina, as there always are.
Winners and losers. All right, Ted. Well, we'll look forward to 2022. Ted George, Chief Narrative Officer at Cleo's Advisory. Always great to talk to you, and compliments of the season.
Indeed, and Happy New Year to you all.